Okay, hey everyone, welcome to The Feel Between. I'm Ahmed.
And I'm Yasmine. And we've got a special episode for you today.
Well, you do have a special episode. I thought you were just, it was a regular, but you did prepare something.
I just had a hiccup. Are you going to edit that out? This is so weird.
No, we're filled with pizza.
Yeah.
We kind of just inhaled
I hope I don't keep
two big slices of pizza.
I hope I don't keep hiccuping. Wait, why were you going to say we don't have a special episode?
I thought it was just a regular. I forgot you prepared something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Malcolm X.
Do you want some peppermint tea? Would that help?
Maybe in a little bit.
Okay.
He died on February 21st,
So
59 years ago. So we'll be doing a little kind of just...
a late episode about him.
Yeah, but I think it'll be really interesting. We'll get into it later, but talking about his life and then also kind of talking about his stance on Palestine, which I think is really obviously relevant today.
I'm excited to hear what you have prepared.
Yeah.
Do you have any items before we get to that?
No, but let's talk about how we're doing. I like to always check in. How are you doing?
I'm good.
We had a fun weekend.
We got a couch.
Oh my god, major
That's
life
probably,
update, y'all. Okay, when I post this on Instagram, I'm gonna have a picture of the couch because it's been amazing.
It's pretty good.
As you know, it's been a journey.
We got a good deal on it. It's a high quality couch.
Got rid of the old one on Buy Nothing. So
yeah.
Well,
all in all, we did it for pretty cheap, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, me too. I was honestly skeptical because it wasn't in the budget for this month, but it was very worth it. I'm glad you convinced me. It makes the whole room look better. It's really comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You doubted me.
I just
you said no, we don't need
budget,
it,
but
and it's not gonna make our lives better. But
it has made our life better.
It has made our lives better.
Even though we are not sure what will happen when we move, I think it was worth it because we're still here until.
We'll probably keep it. I like this one more than the other one.
Yeah, it's a conversation for future us. But yeah, we're here till June 15th. It's worth being comfortable.
It's true.
Yeah. But we had a good weekend. We went to so many events. We did.
We went. You organized a film series.
Yeah, I
co-organized
exactly a film series on Pitt's campus, which is a highlighting Palestinian filmmakers. So we screened 2 films.
A lot of people came. Yeah,
and one of the films, it's called Infiltrators by I think his name was Khalid Jarrar. Yeah, it was really powerful and interesting to see, and yeah, it was just nice to have that kind of thing happen on campus because the students have been killing it, and there's been some faculty movement, but maybe not as much as I think the students would like. So
do you want some water?
No, I'm just gonna push through.
Okay.
Actually, it was really funny because before the first film started, I was all of a sudden I was overcome and I was like, I have to cough, and I was like, this is the worst possible timing, and I ran out.
Oh, I did too because
really?
No, sorry, that was because we did the movies and then we went to a play.
Yeah.
But in between we went to Five Guys and I grabbed a handful of peanuts, a whole scoop of peanuts from Five Guys, and one of the peanut skins was just stuck in the back of my throat right as that play started.
Oh, that sucks. And so you felt
and
like
so
you had to cough.
I was just oh man, I need to cough. Yeah.
But you did it, which is impressive.
Yeah.
I started coughing as soon as the movie started, and then I had to run out, and then I ran to one of my students who was so sweet. She was just like, are you okay? And I was like, yes. Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming. Mm-hmm. I didn't tell my students about the event because this is just me organizing in my own time, but it was still nice that some of them happened to hear about it.
Well attended.
And happened to come out. Yeah.
Lots of people
Yeah,
came.
absolutely.
So good job.
Yeah, and then we saw a cool play that one of our friends told us about. We can we use names?
I don't know. Probably not.
This is the first name, so I think it's okay because there's so many people with this name.
Okay.
We have a friend here who's really nice named Ahmed also.
Uh-huh.
And he was wearing a kufiya, and so was, so were you. And he had glasses, and I confused them briefly, and it was very confusing. But I
How did you
my
confuse
head
them?
On his shoulder.
Yeah, you just went up to another man and kind of kissed him on the shoulder.
I didn't kiss him. I just made a mwah sound that I leaned my head, and he jerked, and I turned to be like, "What's your problem?" It wasn't you.
Yeah.
I was literally about to be like, "What is wrong with you?" And then I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah. Now, do you think this is because you don't wear your glasses? It's certainly not because
I had my glasses on. That was the crazy thing.
No.
Because I just watched the film.
So you're just not paying attention.
Yeah, I think especially when I finish something big, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just saw glasses and a kufiya out of my peripheral vision. I don't see that often. So I was like, it was all funny. It was just fine. But
yeah.
Yeah. And then we saw a cool play, which was about what was it called? It was called Cheating Fate. And it was about the explosion that happened in Beirut. When was that now? Like 2 years ago?
I think so.
At the port.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. And then Saturday night,
I made chai.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you told
for a Robo Cum Fest.
Okay, that sounds like he's being facetious, but honestly, kind of that was the vibe in a good way. But
it was I can't even remember. It was some sort of like technology conference
sex, right?
Hacking sex type thing where it was just a bunch of people and they give them sex toys and they pair people in tech with sex workers and sex advocates, and they see what comes out of it. The presentations happened today, but we didn't get to watch. We were busy.
I didn't know that sex had to be hacked. I'm intrigued.
Me too.
We're doing it wrong.
Supposedly, we have not been hacking sex. I got to put on some cool sunglasses and like, leather fingerless gloves and incorporate a keyboard.
Yeah, we stopped by today to pick up the canister that you dropped off. I forget when, on Friday. But it was cool. The vibe was interesting. It's like a maker space, and it was cool just seeing people seemed really excited to be there, and
yeah, and they like the chai, which is great. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then Saturday night, I went to a local poetry reading, which was actually very on brand for what we're talking about today, dedicated to thinking about intersections between Palestine and Black liberation. So, yeah, that was really nice and really great local readers.
Nice.
And today we've been doing a really nice new thing. We might take a break in a second to see if I can stop hiccuping.
Hold on, why don't you just drink some water?
All right. Here. Tell them about Sacred Sundays while I drink water.
Well, it's usually Saturdays.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just...
It's confusing because we also do Wedding Wednesdays with my mom to plan for our wedding. Careful to not
spill that on your laptop.
And so today we did Sacred Saturday and Wedding Wednesday on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But you explain these things.
I don't actually think of it as sacred. I just came up with it's just kind of a dorky name. But anyway, it's just time that we dedicate. We make sure we just get out of the house early in the morning. First thing in the morning, we just get out of the house.
That's key, yeah.
And work on creative stuff. So you're not allowed really to do like work. And it's because you were feeling like you were just doing a bunch of work stuff all the time and not really dedicating time. So this is a way to do that.
Yeah, it's really nice. I feel like it's so easy to just like have days feel like a series of checklists and not like be in touch with like your creative self. Actually, as you were saying that, I was like, this is so sweet because this whole podcast started because I was like depressed, or not really depressed, but like feeling down and wanted a creative project.
Yeah, that's true.
You're really good at solution solving that, which is very sweet in like very actionable ways. Yeah. But yeah, it's been nice. I mean, today I just read, but even that, like having time to just like read for fun and like not think about if I have to read something strategic for work or.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, you like finished a beat today, and I know you've been working on your screenplay. It's just nice to have that time set aside.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
anything else?
No, and I think I'm good now.
You think you're good?
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a lot of items to get to.
Okay.
And then, do you have any items?
No, I just have a lot to say about Malcolm. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I forgot to update on the last 2 episodes, but I did watch the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin, and I don't really have a lot to say on that, but I appreciated Tucker on a new level because as also a dumb guy who finds himself in conversations and outmatched a lot of the times, he does this thing a lot of the interview that when someone's talking at you and you are not really understanding it and you just kind of glaze over, but then you do this like intense scrunched face to make it look like you're intensely thinking about what it is they're saying.
That's not true. You're a very active conversationalist, but yeah, that definitely seemed like
Sometimes
the
you
vibe
just
from what
get
I
brain
saw
fog.
you over, like when I saw you watching it.
He's just doing this like furrowed eyebrows.
And it seemed like a lot of it was Putin just giving him like a very long Russian history
lesson.
Right.
So the first like 30 minutes of the interview, Putin starts with a Russian history going back to like the 8th century.
What a flex.
And just
not a fan of Putin, and still a flex.
The way that you know that Putin had the exact interview that he wanted to have with Tucker is he compiles this list of articles from Russia's archives and letters and stuff. I forget the exact nature of them, but he's like, and you can see this in the archives in these letters, and he gives him a folio.
Oh God.
And he's like, you can have this. We prepared this for you. So clearly he just had an outline of exactly what he wanted to say, and he's like, here's a folio proving everything that I just said. And the other thing is that he kind of just he actually makes fun of Tucker in the interview, kind of for not getting into the CIA, because Tucker,
Oh my God, really?
Tucker wanted to be part of the CIA. I think his dad was CIA or something, like someone in his family was, I think. And Tucker Carlson at one point in his life wanted to go to the CIA, did not make it, and Putin made fun of him for that. I might slide the clip of that in. And then after the interview, I think this was a couple days ago, Putin was just remarking on the interview and saying like, yeah, I wish he had sharper questions, because I would have really liked to get into, be in a position where I had to come up with sharper answers for things. So
basically a lot of like, it's funny because I saw a lot of the media coverage that was like, was this a moral thing or not to do? But honestly, I feel like more of the take should have been like, wow, this man did nothing with this opportunity.
I think honestly, my feeling is that it would be great for someone from
who's actually a
the media,
journalist,
an independent journalist or whatever,
Oh, of course, yeah.
to interview
There's nothing wrong with
Putin
that,
if they can get the interview, but like prepare for it.
Yeah, no, this seemed like an utterly
This
wasted
guy,
opportunity.
like, maybe it seemed like he read the Wikipedia for Russia and the Wikipedia for Ukraine, and then like forgot half of it, and then walked into the interview and just did not know how to control it.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question.
Or item. Oh, okay.
An item in the form of a question.
Okay.
What did Elmo do to Jordan Peterson is the question.
Oh, I brought up Elmo last time, and I was ahead of you on Twitter with this.
With Jordan Peterson?
No, but I'm guessing it's still the same thing, right? Is it when Elmo asked about how people were feeling and everyone responded, and then Elmo like did a really good job talking about it and giving resources to Jordan Peterson not like that?
Well, so there's that, but then there's also this. Give me one sec to cue up the clip. This is Jordan Peterson and his daughter on her podcast, which he, I guess, does fairly often.
Because that's the only guest you know.
So he's talking about Elmo, and I didn't go and try to find a clip of the original audio. So this is like from a TikTok video that has some increasingly intense music. I think it captures pretty well just how angry and perturbed Jordan Peterson is by Elmo.
Why do you hate Elmo so much? He's a cringing little milksop of a puppet. He's whiny. He's false. He's fake. Nice. We used to sit around when I was a teenager and get stoned and watch Sesame Street. Elmo's like the politically correct puppet of the Muppet troops, and that whiny voice just grates. Everything about that bloody puppet grates on me. Elmo, sickening puppet.
Weirdo. What a weird guy.
That's there's that, and then because like you said, after everyone kind of trauma dumped on Elmo that in end of January, I think there was a Jordan Peterson, like he tweeted at him and he said like "fuck you, Elmo" or something like that. It's like, and then so I went back and like just was trying to see how far back this went.
Yeah.
So I searched for Jordan Peterson's tweets on Elmo. In 2022, there was a Babylon Bee, which I think is like the conservative.
It's like a conservative onion, yeah.
They posted a story that said Elmo dies of myocarditis after receiving the COVID vaccine. And Jordan Peterson quote tweeted that and said, "And not a moment too soon. I've always detested that whiny, infantilized puppet." And then in 2012, there was a New York Post story that was posted about the guy who puppets Elmo. I think his name is Kevin Clash or something like that. Mm-hmm. He's a black man. And he was accused, I don't know if you remember this, but he was accused of like being sexually inappropriate toward like minors.
Oh.
And I don't know what came out of that. I don't know if he was exonerated, or I don't think he ever went to jail. I think he was exonerated.
Okay.
But anyway, Jordan Peterson tweeted that. Oh, sorry. Oh, I can't find it. What was it? Here we go. He said, just another reason why your children should never, in all caps, be allowed to
I
watch.
like how instead of this being like the main reason,
Or
he's
even-
like, just another.
or even know about Elmo. And again, this was in 2012.
Wow.
So I'm wondering if like he was
Something bad went down in his
traumatized by
childhood.
one of these like Times Square Elmos or something
Yeah.
like that. Like
Or,
he was
like-
touched inappropriately by Elmo.
I mean, he's a psychologist, so he should really think
He
about
should.
this. But maybe,
yeah.
maybe like
Maybe he ate
a
Elmo because he's
traumatic-
black. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe there was a traumatic moment in his childhood where like his parents announced their divorce and he was holding an Elmo doll. And now he has like a
And it was
bad
laughing. It was like one of those
association.
tickle me.
Yeah.
So it started laughing
Yeah.
as soon as they were like,
We're like-
hey, we're getting a divorce and it's
Right.
because of you, actually.
And he just
and Elmo's like,
he's like, fuck this thing.
and he's like, no, Elmo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
parents hate you. Maybe.
some kind of weird association definitely formed because I feel like
I
there's
really
no-
want to know what happens.
Yeah,
I
there's
was.
no reason for anyone to have such strong opinions about children's puppets. It's just not
I mean,
really...
like if you heard that clip, he's just like
Yeah.
hates, like he's working himself up. He's probably gonna end up in another, one of those. What did his daughter put him in? Just like a psychiatric ward or something.
Really?
Yeah, she had him like forcibly
The same daughter whose
institutionalized.
podcast he's on, or a different
Yeah,
daughter? Oh,
same.
interesting.
Yeah. They have a weird relationship.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Maybe Elmo's to blame for that too.
Yeah. I have another clip here. This is about Donald Trump and his popularity with black people. This is a Fox News clip talking about how Trump is appealing to black voters. Apparently, Trump came out with a collectible sneaker.
During Black History Month, that's really awkward.
Yeah.
Speaker thing. I was on social media last night. Very interesting as you see black support eroding from Joe Biden. This is connecting with black America because they love sneakers. They're into sneakers. They love
God.
this is a big deal.
Wait, who's
Certainly
speaking? I
in
can't
the
see.
inner city. So when you have
Some
Trump
correspondent.
roll out his sneaker line, they're like, wait a minute, this is cool. He's reaching them on a level that defies and is above politics. The culture always trumps
stupid,
politics.
so stupid.
And Trump understands culture like no politician I've ever seen.
Ugh, so dumb.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, we have two. Terrible,
It's the shoes. It's not that Joe Biden is bad and black voters are like, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
They're going to Trump because he came out with I don't know if you saw the shoes, but they're like gold and they have kind of the American flag on them.
Wow.
So it's like a very Trump branded
Very gaudy,
sneaker.
yeah.
And so black voters are seeing that and they're like, shoes.
And there's like, I was just reading a Times article that was talking about the governor of Michigan and how hard it is for her right now to try and really rep for Joe Biden and show her loyalty to the party. And then it listed out people from Michigan that are like defecting from Biden. And it was like young people, Muslims, including black people, union affiliated people. And I was like, wow, what a diverse coalition. Maybe the problem is you. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like,
Yeah.
Like,
I know
if
this
these are
was
all
on
demographics that you're losing. I think it's time to do a little introspection, not be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know this is on Fox News, but I feel like Democrats are kind of looking at it the same way. They're
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
what's wrong? They actually do this thing. They're like, the whole Joe Biden, you ain't black thing or whatever. Like there's like, what's wrong with black voters? That, it's something wrong with them and not wrong with the candidate or the party
it's the same
itself.
thing for everyone. They'll be like, hey, like, you don't want another Muslim ban? Like, finger wag. And it's like the threat of not having a Muslim ban is not enough for us to vote for you if there's,
Yeah.
an ongoing active genocide that is affecting a lot of communities that we intersect with and just in general as a moral issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another Trump speech. I didn't pull it up, but I don't know if you saw it. He was speaking in front of some Republican Black Caucus or something like that.
I'm good.
And he just, maybe I'll slide the clip in here, but he was like, whoa, the lights are so bright. I can't see anyone except for the black people. And you're just like,
Idiot.
bro, it's insane what he's saying. And he still dominated Nikki Haley in her own state.
Yeah. Wipe the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a moron. I don't know what to say. It's depressing. It's just like a lack of a choice if there ever was one.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Some more serious Palestine related items that I've got. Just kind of a little roundup. Actually, earlier today, there was a self-immolation in front of the Israeli embassy in DC.
Former soldier, right? Former U.S. soldier.
Not former. Active duty.
Current. Okay.
Active duty, I think Air Force.
Wow.
I'm sure more details will come out in a bit because, again, this happened today. But I do have a thread. A woman a reporter has a video of it. I'm not going to play the video because she hasn't tweeted the video, but she did she did go and kind of like transcribe what happened in the video that she has. So give me a second to pull that up.
Yeah, the coverage in mainstream outlets, I haven't looked extensively, but from what I've seen, has been hasn't reported on like what he was actually saying, which seems to be like the kind of key thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So she says, I'm going to paraphrase a lot of it here, but this is from Talia Jane's Twitter. She's at Talia OTG. She says, after ignition, he repeatedly yells, "Free Palestine." He's wearing his fatigues and he started burning himself. For a full minute, police, she's unsure about whether it's, federal police or DC police. They see him say, "May I help you, sir?" And as he's on fire, scream at him to get on the ground, but do not otherwise engage. One cop appears with a gun drawn on the man after he collapses, still consumed by flame.
Response to everything.
Yeah, I'm like, obviously this is a horrific situation, but like,
no,
it blew my mind that the first, like a police officer in the U.S. sees a man on fire and draws a gun.
Let me get my gun out.
Like, how is that going to help the situation at all? How are you the one in danger?
Yeah.
It just makes no fucking sense. So one cop begins spraying him with a fire extinguisher. The other one keeps his gun drawn. And the one in the white shirt yells, "I don't need guns. I need a fire extinguisher." More cops arrive, as do EMTs. 3 fire extinguishers are used. I think at the time of her tweeting this, it was unclear whether he was still alive, but it sounds like he's in severe condition.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I mean, I really, sorry.
Well, yeah, one last thing. So before in the video, he says, "I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest." So he's letting people know that that's what he's about to do.
Right.
And he says, "But compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." He walks to the driveway of the Israeli embassy, places his phone down to film, goes up to the driveway, dumps liquid from a metal water bottle over his head, tosses the bottle, places his uniform hat on his head, pulls out a lighter and lights it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And this is the second time someone has done this. Not at the Israeli DC embassy, but at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I think in December, a woman also self-immolated. And no one really talked about it. It kind of just happened.
Yeah, it was just like in certain circles, I think.
Yeah. And then the press that it did get was reporting on how afraid everyone inside the consulate was
right.
when it happened. They said it was an attack on them. Yeah. No, it's just kind of an awful thing.
Yeah, it's a really obviously drastic form of protest.
Yeah. But it really speaks to kind of the desperation of, I mean, a lot of people here, right? Like, in some ways, I would never tell anyone to do this, but like I understand and somewhat like admire the conviction, because it's someone who believes so strongly that these people are suffering. No one is listening.
Yeah.
Who can change things? What else are we to do but to, I guess express some of that suffering in a way? I'm not really sure, but I think it is an ultimate act of despair and desperation that I think a lot of people
feel.
I'm
somewhat on the other end of that, but still obviously not going to critique someone who felt that they had to do what they had to do.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's as culturally legible here as it is in other places. Like, I'm not sure if there's a history of people actually responding to that in a way that affirms action. Like, I know that like self-immolations in some parts of the world, like the Arab Revolution, have like began whole movements. I don't know that that's ever happened in the US. I think it's often read as like an act of also like a mental health issue or like a suicide attempt. So it's kind of
I mean, I don't know. Like people can say mental. I think that's how it's probably going to get reported here,
Right.
where people are like, "Oh, clearly he's crazy," because people. I think that's a good point. People don't get galvanized by it in the same way that they do in other places. Maybe that'll change. I don't know.
Me either. And I also don't like know much about it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is an example in the U.S. where that has been motivating that I'm not aware of. But
it seems like the guy like very clearly understood his motives and expressed them in a way that I think it would be hard to say he did this only because
X, Y, Z. Yeah.
I think it more speaks to the powerlessness that everyone experiences, and they say, what else are we to do? Like I can't. My vote's not really going to change anything, and my signing a petition or getting a ceasefire resolution passed at like a municipal level, whatever. Like, so
yeah, I really appreciated something that Professor Mohammed Bamia said. He's a professor of sociology at Pitt, and I think this is public record, so we can say it. About the film that we watched, just that like there always are choices. And I think that
you're talking about the response to my question.
Yeah. But I think also in reference to, and I know we said this before, but like, as long as there are Palestinians fighting for Palestinian liberation, even though it's difficult, like I think that there is a fine but important line between. I think despair is not bad. I think it's just like if it leads to a lack of action, which is not this guy. Obviously, there was an action, whether or not I agree with it. But I'm saying that more as a reminder for myself, I guess.
Yeah. So wish him well. I think he's in the hospital recovering, but and I don't think his name has been released.
Haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned this, and I hadn't seen it or looked into it much, but the Moataz and Bissan, who are two journalists who were on the ground in Gaza, very young. I think Moataz was 24. Bissan is even younger. She's like 19.
I think she's
20.
also in her early 20s. Yeah.
Okay. There's like been critique, and I don't know if maybe you can mention it because I'm not really sure, but there's critique that they are anti-black. And then there was a thread that I actually had here that I think was pretty good, talking about that.
I've got some also. Yeah. So basically, my understanding is that there was aid that was supposed to go to Gaza that the Egyptian government mislabeled as going to Sudan. And Moataz was like looking at the aid trucks and made a comment of like, does it look like I'm black? Like basically the Egyptian government's so stupid they mislabeled this. Is that a good summary?
Yeah. I think it still doesn't fully make sense to me. Maybe the joke just didn't translate or something like that. But
yeah.
Anyway, okay. So I think because of that, people have been saying like, oh, look, like he's anti-black and like.
I will say, I think, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure we've got different Twitter feeds. Most of the conversation I saw was fairly thoughtful and like nuanced. I think the other thing that kind of came up was like the misfortune of like different forms of oppression being pitted against each other. Yeah. Because like Sudan also obviously needs aid.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I actually haven't read it all the way through, so I'll be reading some of it for the first time. I'm going to pick a few tweets from Fanon is Canon. That's the handle. So she's saying a lot of people are stating that they are done with Bissan and Moataz because they are anti-black, and it leads me to a series of thoughts I've been having for a while. She says, it's been weird to see how many of us in the West have built these deeply problematic parasocial relationships with people like Bissan documenting and living under genocide. We have created a celebrification of them whilst they live through their extermination. They are not your celebrities. They are not whichever fictions and idealized victim you've created in your psyche. Liking their tweets and Instagram posts have done little to end their extermination. You have no cause and no claim to moral superiority here. Yep. She says, if the world is built on anti-blackness, it is not a video or a laugh or disagreement with Americentric visions of race. That is the exemplar of anti-blackness. It is us, all of us, including black folk in the imperial core, who have now been conscripted, defended and pacified by imperialism. So I
Yeah.
think she's got a lot of else here, but I think the overall point
The
is
person who also initially, who I think is a big advocate for Sudan, and I think is Sudanese, and I can't find the Twitter thread right now, but the person who initially kind of posted the video that went a little viral on Twitter that was like upset, also took it down and was like, hey, like Mumtaz has like apologized, and like I'm not looking to like drag on this issue. So I think it was handled fairly well by everyone. And I think something else that I appreciated, Margari Hill, she is the leader of the Muslim ARC, which is a Muslim anti-racism collaborative. They do a lot of really cool training and works nationally. I'm trying to find her tweet. I might take a second here just to find it, but she basically said something to the effect of like, I don't need people to be perfect representatives of anything.
Yeah, exactly.
To like,
That's another...
to like have solidarity with them and to like, you know, fight against their extermination. But then she also had some tweets that I appreciated that were like, one thing that she kind of pushed back on that I thought was helpful, and it was not specific to these two people who have had just an unfathomable burden placed on them. But around the discourse was that like anti-blackness is pretty global, and apparently like anti-black racism is an issue in Palestine, which is not surprising because it's an issue pretty globally. So she was like, yeah, both these things can be true. Like we don't have to be like,
it's
hey,
an issue in Israel.
Of course, yeah. But we don't have to say, I mean, there are like histories of global slavery networks, which are why anti-blackness and colorism are currently issues, right? And of colonization. So like, we don't have to say, hey, this is an American-centric read to say that someone might find this hurtful. You know, like the racism is definitely also an Arab issue. Like, yeah, but that's also like not the main point when there's a genocide happening. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what else needs to happen for there to be like people to work on this issue in Palestine? Like Palestinians who are living happy lives, who are not being fucking killed. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
the
it's not...
ultimate anti-black act in Gaza is the genocide of just everyone, right?
Yeah,
like it's,
absolutely, including Afro-Palestinians. Yeah,
there's nothing
100%.
liberatory about an ongoing genocide.
And we should note that there are Afro-Palestinians. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, it's the same way that people try to say like, you can't, you know, be gay in Gaza or in Palestine or whatever, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Two more things to mention here. So there was an update on the, I also have a tweet thread bookmarked on this update. Just kind of a short update on the New York Times story that went out a while ago about, you know, the screams without words sort of thing.
Be more explicit. In case
so this was the
following.
story in the New York Times that was done by, I forget his name.
That was accusing the one that was.
That was saying it was an it was released as an investigative piece into mass sexual, like a coordinated mass sexual attack by Hamas on October 7th. So they interviewed a family of a girl who, you know, it was reported that she was raped, and you know, she's kind of like the main figure of the story. They talked to the family, and then after the story kind of comes out, and we talked about it, right? So a lot of other people started looking into it, and very quickly, I'm talking about like within a day or two, looked at each example, and the story completely fell apart, right? And in addition to that, the family who was interviewed was highly critical of the story, saying that they never would have done it if they knew that the New York Times was looking for a story about rape victims, because they themselves said there's no evidence supporting this. We don't think she was raped. We know she was killed, but why are you like taking that angle, and why are you trying to kind of traumatize us with that? But it turns out one of the co-authors of the story, Anat Schwartz, has liked multiple tweets supporting genocidal actions in Gaza.
Not surprising, yeah.
So just kind of, I just wanted to bring that up because there's a lot more here to Jeremy Scahill's tweet. But I wanted to bring that up because there seems to be no consideration of journalistic conflict of interest when it comes to Palestine.
It's very one-sided. It's crazy. If you have if you are Palestinian, you can't report on the issue, and if you I mean, we've talked about articles before here where like someone's son was in the IDF and they were still like reporting on the issue.
Yeah. What story was that? I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Might have been the feminist one, I think.
I think you're right. It's the girl boss one.
The girl boss one? Okay. So I'm just going to read really quickly the tweet that Anat Schwartz liked. It's from someone named David Mizrahi Vertheim. Part of the tweet says, if all the captives are not returned immediately, turn the strip into a slaughterhouse. If a hair falls from their head, execute security prisoners, violate any norm on the way to victory, for them to see and be seen. So advocating for just the most aggressive violence possible.
Yeah.
Just to make a show of it.
Yep.
And then lastly, about a month ago, there was a ruling in the ICJ that said that Israel had to do whatever it could to avoid committing a genocide. And it was to submit a report of all the things that it's kind of supposed to be doing. Some of the things that they are supposed to have done is allow in aid. And so, this woman named Diana Butu just has like a little good roundup that I saw on Instagram today. I was like, oh yeah, that report is supposed to happen.
And it hasn't yet, right?
So it was January 26th, and so so they have until midnight. So maybe they're staying
We're
up.
waiting,
Maybe
we're
it's
waiting.
maybe it's a late nighter for Israel, and they're like, oh fuck, it's due tomorrow. So yeah, they were supposed to submit the response outlining the measures it has taken since January 26th to prevent genocide. Here's what they actually did. Israel has killed an average of 100 Palestinians per day, bringing the death toll from 26,422 to 29,514, which I'm just going to state here, I don't think that's an accurate death toll just because I think it's impossible to get that now, and I'm sure it's way, way higher than that. Israel blocked delivery of humanitarian aid, including by allowing Israelis to erect a bouncy castle in front of Kerem Shalom, the spot of entry for goods. Israel allowed only an average of 62 trucks of aid per day after committing to allowing 200 per day, though 500 or more are needed, and continues to refuse to resume electricity and water and supplies. Israel has not prosecuted a single soldier for their genocidal acts. Israel has not acted to stop genocidal speech. In fact, I don't know if you saw the other day, there was a woman from the Knesset who was giving a speech.
I didn't.
And she was just like, I'm proud of, of what Israel's done. Her title is also, she's part of some like women's affinity
Social
groups, like
thing,
for women and equal rights
yeah.
or something like that. So yeah, that's it, right? Like we're all just watching Israel happily like renege on everything that the court has instructed it to do with full support of the U.S.
The bouncy castle thing is really gross.
Well, this is kind of what we talked about last time too. Like they don't just do the thing; they do it in a way that is sadistically gleeful, which is really disturbing. Yeah. That's the roundup that I have.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Malcolm X.
Okay, Malcolm. So again, it's the 59th anniversary of Malcolm's death. So we're going to talk a little bit about his life. I think the kind of goal here is to go over some sort of biographical facts, so we just can kind of think about, what his life looked like. Talk a little bit about the historiography, so kind of the different ways that he's been sort of repurposed. And I think this happens with a lot of famous historical figures. It's not just unique to Malcolm, but it is really interesting. What Malcolm means to contemporary Muslim Americans. And then lastly, Malcolm is an international figure because he was an amazing international solidarity builder, and what he had to say specifically about Palestine and how that's helpful for us today. So that's where we're headed. I'm going to start with the timeline of Malcolm's life. I'll try not to get too in detail, but it all is super, super interesting. So he was born in 1925. He was born Malcolm Little. That was his birth name, in Omaha, Nebraska. His father was a Baptist minister. And both of his parents were really involved in Marcus Garvey's United Negro Improvement Association. So the UNIA had this kind of idea of a Back to Africa movement, but they never actually got that into the business of like repatriating people, quote unquote, or like trying to, what in essence would have actually been probably very messy colonization, if Liberia is any indication. It was more of like a Black Pride movement, and it really sparked a lot of other important political movements. So it's notable that he grew up with both his parents being really involved in that organization. And when he was 3, they moved to Lansing, Michigan, and they moved into a neighborhood that was zoned for white residents. And in November of that year, shortly after they had moved, their house was burned to the ground by what his family believed to be the KKK for living in a neighborhood that was like the unofficial policy was whites only. So exposed to white supremacist violence at a very young age, obviously I think had a huge impact on the way that he saw things. And then in 1931, Malcolm's father was killed, and most people believe, including Malcolm and his family, that he was killed by the KKK.
So I actually don't know this. Did he disappear, or did they have the body?
So it's really sketchy and sad, but police claim that it was a streetcar accident. But that's what the police report says. But Malcolm's father had received multiple threats from the KKK earlier that year that if he continued to be visible, if he continued to like take action in the town, that he would be disposed of. So and I think there also is good evidence to support Malcolm's family thinking that the KKK had connection to the local police in Michigan, in that town in Michigan. So, and that kind of like began a period of like decline and hardship for his family. So his mother really struggled with mental health, and she was institutionalized, which is really complicated. And Malcolm seems to feel that the state was really quick to kind of take away her rights, and he ended up in foster care, and his siblings were not kept together. And so he had a lot of feelings about kind of specifically how the American state sort of intervened in breaking up his family. And it's one of those things where like it may have been true that as a widow with many children, like she was struggling, but like, yeah, just the fact that like all of his siblings were separated and that she was so quickly institutionalized permanently is really disturbing.
Yeah.
So at 16, he moved to Boston to live with his sister, Ella Collins. And actually, when I was at Harvard Divinity School, there was a really cool practice that some people were doing where they would like go walk around Boston and all the places that he spent time. It was almost like a little kind of funny pilgrimage in a way. They would go to like where he lived with Ella, and they would just go to like the places that he spent time in Roxbury. And that's where he was as like a young man. And then at 20 years old, he was charged with stealing, breaking and entering, and firearms possession. And this is a really good thing, I think, to kind of pause on, because I think that the stories of his criminality have been exaggerated, and he's partially to blame for that. In his own autobiography, he kind of like hyped up like this life of crime and like being really streetwise, I think because it made his story of like rise in the NOI and like his redemption arc a little bit stronger. I mean, and not to like make light obviously of breaking and entering or stealing, but he never like physically hurt anyone, like and he was convicted for 8 to 10 years in prison, which is crazy. The 2 white women that he was charged alongside, including one who was his girlfriend, were each sentenced to 7 months. So, you know, huge disparity there. One thing to their credit, there was apparently a push by the police for the women to charge the 2 men they were with, so Malcolm and his friend Jarvis, with rape, and they refused, saying that was not something that had taken place because the police were just uncomfortable with the fact that there was 2 white women and 2 black men, and wanted to press additional charges. So it's in prison.
Gets back to I don't know if you remember this, but we talked about that Right to Sex book. Yeah. Most false rape accusations are actually men against men.
Really? Yeah. I forgot that. I think you told me that, and I forgot that.
Used to kind of as a smear tactic.
Isn't it? That's such a good reminder, because it's so weird how like even myself, and I hate this, but I feel like I default to thinking about like a defensiveness of like, well, most women don't lie about rape, but it's actually more interesting to be like, do you know who most people who lie about rape are? Yeah. Like other men. Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. And then in prison in 1948, so a couple of his siblings had converged the Nation of Islam, which I could say a lot about, but I think I won't for this episode. But it's an organization that was unique to the United States, that was founded here in the U.S. That was, depending on your perspective, like a kind of variant of Islam, or Islamically inspired, but fairly different from like most mainstream global practices. Having said that, practices are diverse everywhere. But anyway, so he was corresponding with Elijah Muhammad, who was like the founder of the Nation of Islam, essentially, in the United States, since the first guy who founded it, or not the founder, but the first leader of the movement. And Malcolm just undertook like a really rigorous program of self-study. He joined the debate team. And actually, my good friend worked at that prison a little bit in Massachusetts, and like of course, I mean, how could it not? It's still something, it's a huge point of pride there. When people like undertake like and take college classes or do self-study or join the debate team, like a lot of it is done in Malcolm's memory for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And this is kind of,
You've got to keep that microphone close to your
Oh,
mouth.
sorry.
Yeah.
This is dramatized in the movie for those who have seen it. But apparently he started by reading the dictionary, and just like anything he could learn, he like was gonna learn. I mean, he was very much like a college level education of self-study while he was incarcerated.
Okay. Yeah.
And then in 1952, he was released after 6 years of being incarcerated. He joined the Nation of Islam. So this is a really interesting kind of key number here. Around the time that Malcolm joined the Nation in 1952, there was only 400 members, like nationally.
Yeah.
And let me find the exact number because it's so interesting. So 2 years later, and this is like historian Manning Marble says this is almost exclusively because of Malcolm, 40,000 members. He was such a good orator. He gave speeches around the country.
Wow.
And like, I mean, the group grew tenfold. I mean, people were so drawn to him. It wasn't just him, but I think that is like the main factor for that growth in 2 years.
Yeah.
He was an amazing orator. He really spoke to people. And yeah, I think there was only one more event I wanted to go over in detail. I won't go over as much like the end of his life. This is just, I think, such a really great example of organizing that I really wish I had learned about earlier in life. But in 1957, a member of the Nation of Islam, where Malcolm was then based in Harlem, so he had like his mosque in Harlem that he was kind of the leader of.
This is in April, I think.
Yes.
Anniversary's coming up soon.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, maybe we
14th?
should talk about it then. 26th. Good
26th?
memory. I can't believe you remember that it was in April. How did you remember that? So yeah, John X, member of the Harlem Temple, was beaten by the NYPD. And when Malcolm went to kind of check in on him, the NYPD or the New York Police Department said, hey, we're not holding him. They just lied blatantly. And then Malcolm gathered.
He was beaten and taken by the NYPD.
Right. Taken into custody. They were holding him, but denying that they were holding him.
Right.
And Malcolm gathered the Fruit of Islam, which is the kind of male military wing of the Nation of Islam, which is honestly just styled off of like American style military techniques. Mm-hmm. And then they gathered 500 people to surround the 28th Street precinct station. And the NYPD apparently was just like fucking stunned.
That shit rocks.
Yeah, they were just like, they described it as an unprecedented display of power. They were just like in panic mode. And then the thing that was really powerful was that after the Fruit of Islam kind of came, like thousands of Harlemites started following. Like they just gathered like mass amounts of bodies and people. And they did all of this. I mean, Malcolm gets a rep for really being like a kind of Fanonian or Frantz Fanon inspired kind of voice of violence. But he really only ever advocated for self-defense. He was not really like a big proponent of violence. I mean, this is like an example.
It's always the case that when the oppressed people do violence, it will be categorized as or reported as just kind of out of nowhere. Right?
100%.
To make it seem irrational or erratic, these people are like, again, like savages.
Absolutely.
But it's in reaction to something, and oftentimes it's very ideological and thought through.
Yeah,
it's not random.
Yeah, you're right. The random
violence that happens is just like a bunch of crazy ass white supremacists who will bomb an abortion clinic or like do a bunch of other like crazy shit. You know what I'm saying? Like
truth. Yeah.
Like
yeah, but no, you're right. The kind of like violence of self-defense, it's not really violence. It's self-defense. And like in this case, like the NYPD were so intimidated, and it was obviously a display of power with the kind of implication of like, hey, you're outnumbered. But no one like lifted a finger. No one pulled a gun. Like there was no actual violence, you know?
Yeah. When you roll up with 500 people
and then 1,000 by the end,
like what are they going to do at that point?
Exactly. It just kind of shows like the power of numbers,
of numbers, but also like you know,
and of organization. I think the fact that they were like marching in military organization, leading the crowd,
militancy.
I
think is the difference, right? Because we have protests now that will have 400,000 people that don't achieve what this would achieve.
No, you're right.
You know what I'm saying?
And
like
they're permitted.
It's militancy. We get permits now and we go exactly where we're allowed to. And I'm not saying like these are totally, absolutely useless, but this is 500 people suddenly surrounding the NYPD. One of the worst fucking, most racist, violent police departments in the country. In addition to Chicago and LAPD. Like,
yeah, that's pretty much trifecta.
the guy got released, right?
Yeah. So he was released, and then not only was he released, but the Hinton sued the NYPD for police brutality and won the largest settlement to date in history. Yeah,
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate act of like self-respect.
No, you're right. It's pretty incredible. It's definitely something to like study and learn from.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, you've definitely like turned me on early through thinking about caravanserai. Not early, but I mean, I think you were someone who made me think more about like, why do we get permits for protest? And I'm like a little bit of a rule follower. I'm
or
still
just
thinking
like all
about
the,
it, but this is like a good example of like, oh yeah, like sometimes
Yeah.
you just have to, and also it also speaks to the power of like, you had to have already had that infrastructure in place. You have to be really fucking organized so that you can jump into place for something like this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Exactly. Yeah, that's a good roundup.
Yeah. And then I'll just kind of finish off here. In 1958, he married Betty. Gotta mention that. Their first child was born. In 1959, he made his first trips abroad, which we'll get into more later. And I would love to talk about this more at another date, but just for sake of time now, we'll kind of gloss over this. But in 1964, he ended up leaving the Nation of Islam and converting to Sunni Islam. I'll say one quick thought on this. I think that this conversion was more gradual. I think we sometimes think about conversion as something that you just kind of flip around. But through his trips abroad, he was like learning how to pray. He was having shifts in thought. A lot of people in the nation were kind of slowly shifting in different directions, including towards what we would think of as more Sunni orthodoxy. And so I don't know that it was like an immediate shift. The main thing that sort of made him leave was he found out that Elijah, or one of the main things was that he found out that Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the movement, had mistresses and just like wasn't living in a way that was in accordance to like how he was preaching.
So I think he felt the nation was too formed around the persona of Elijah Muhammad.
Yeah, and he also went on Hajj and kind of felt called to God in like a different version of Islam.
Yeah.
But something I think is really critical to note is that I think there's been a little bit of
Wait, hold on. I think those are gunshots.
Really?
No, that can't be that many gunshots. That's fireworks.
I think they're fireworks.
Okay.
What a This Is America moment though.
Yeah, I thought those were gunshots for a second.
Yeah, I think they're fireworks. We don't actually really hear gunshots here. We haven't yet. We used to a lot in Durham where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
I think those were fireworks. There were too many.
But now they're done. That's too few fireworks. Like if it was like a baseball game.
Hopefully it's let's just pause real fast.
More. I don't know.
Do you want to text our neighbors and ask? We used to text our neighbors all the time. We'd be like fireworks or gunshots or backfiring car or gunshots.
Yeah. It's fireworks.
It's fireworks,
That's
right?
fireworks.
But why can't I see fireworks? I see fireworks. It's
Okay.
confirmed. I can see them from the window. All right, sorry. Back to the Malcolm time frame. I was saying, so he did have a really big shift spiritually, and he acknowledged that after Hajj. But it was a
When
shift
did he change his name?
It was a shift that was a long time in the making. He changed it to Malik al-Shabazz. Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. Yeah.
Was that after Hajj?
I think so. Good question. Maybe look that up, but I think so. I think you're right. Because he dropped the axe, I guess. That was affiliated with the nation. So all of that was real, and there's beautiful letters that are absolutely real that he says, like, he prayed alongside white people and white Muslims and people of different backgrounds, and he kind of had this feeling of like, okay, like, the part of the nation's theology was that white people were like the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And so like he kind of rethought some of that, obviously. One thing though I think that's happened a little bit, especially in Muslim circles, is there's been a little bit of a sanitization of his legacy. He still was very, very committed to Black liberation after Hajj, and he was still just as militant. And I will say one thing that changed about his tactic is he was more open to a variety of tactics, essentially. But he himself personally was not that interested in integration as a policy. Like, he was not looking to be the kind of leader who was mostly interfacing with different groups in the US. He was interested in interfacing with third world liberation movements in the United States and globally. What he saw as third world oppressed peoples, so both like people of color in the US, but especially Black people, and then third world people abroad. But he was not like looking to like sit down at the like interfaith potluck. Like, that was not his vibe.
Very Trotskyist of Malcolm.
I don't know enough about Trotsky to say, but yeah. But anyway, in 1965, on February 21st, so close to today's date, he was only 39 years old, so incredibly young, and had just made a very large transformation in his life. He was murdered, and we don't know by who.
The FBI.
FBI, or honestly, it could have been like there were.
Think people say Elijah Muhammad, right?
Yeah,
Within
well,
the NOI.
and it could have been both. It could have been,
both
because FBI had infiltrated the Nation of Islam, so it could have been like, it could have been someone in the nation who was paid by the FBI. It's really hard to say. Yeah. All right, that's everything I had to say about his biographical facts. Wanted to talk a little bit about Malcolm's like historiography, or like how he's remembered. So the autobiography came out in 1965. All right, Malcolm, let's talk about kind of like historical remembrances of Malcolm, because I think it's really interesting. So the autobiography comes out.
Before we do that,
okay,
you need to hold the microphone to your mouth.
Stop.
You stop.
Is that better?
There you go.
That's so close.
Right,
I feel like I'm about to like.
But that's how you have to do it.
Make out the microphone.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So same year that Malcolm. I lost my train of thought. Okay. Malcolm dies, and a year later, the autobiography comes out. I think. Have you read the autobiography?
I think I got like halfway through it on audiobook.
Nice.
Yeah.
I read the autobiography in high school. I think I had the same reaction a lot of young people did, where I was like, wow, like this is incredible. And it is. It's like a really important work of American literature. It's definitely something you should read if you haven't read it. A lot of wisdom to be gained. I think something that I feel pretty strongly about now, though, is that it's really not correct to call it an autobiography. It's not an autobiography. It was an interview, a series of interviews that he did with Alex Haley. And the initial plan was for Malcolm to sign off on the book before it was published, but then he got killed. So the book is actually, Alex Haley had a particular agenda, and that doesn't mean that it's not a good book or an important one. It is. But it really focuses on that post-Hajj transformation and kind of tries to fit Malcolm, I think, a bit into this mold of like, the reformed Malcolm. And actually there were entire chapters that Alex Haley like cut from the autobiography before publishing it that had to do with like Malcolm's plans for continued activism post NOI. So yeah, it's an important piece, but it definitely tells a particular narrative, and I think it's good to kind of learn about it as a biography and not an autobiography. So we have that memorialization, and then relevant to the class that I'm teaching now on Islam and hip hop, in the late 80s and early 90s, there's an explosion of Black nationalist references in hip hop, many of which are drawing on the Nation of Islam, kind of inspired by Farrakhan's, Louis Farrakhan, who's a leader even today of the Nation of Islam, his Million Man March and his kind of like rhetoric. People like are looking more into the nation and are excited about Malcolm and kind of bring him up a lot in terms of sampling him for hip hop speeches. I think also he was a really good orator. He just makes for a really good sample. So there's like a just kind of insane amount of sampling of Malcolm in hip hop. And Spike Lee actually kind of like credits that with kind of keeping Malcolm's legacy alive and a resurgence of interest in Malcolm. And then in 92, which is the year that I was born, the movie comes out, Spike Lee's movie of Malcolm X. In 1999, there is a U.S. Postal stamp issued of Malcolm, which I think is so interesting because it kind of just shows like the United States government, which was not a huge fan, kind of, you know, accepting Malcolm. It's kind of interesting to watch how that process kind of changes over time. You know, you can be hated within your lifetime, but then later on you become like a figure that is worthy of thinking about in death and in memoriam. And even today, there's a lot of conversation about Malcolm. In 2020, a really kind of funny documentary came out. Not funny, but we watched a little bit of it. Who killed Malcolm? People still trying to figure out kind of how the assassination went down. Yeah, the last thing I'll say about his legacy before we talk about Malcolm in Palestine is he's very strongly revered by the Muslim American community. I think it's fair to say, especially by young Muslims. I think because he offers a legacy of resistance to the American state, but also an association with Islam that is deeply and authentically, that resistance is very much born of the U.S. Yeah, but it's also like a very American version of Islam, right? Like he's an American Muslim figure. It is interesting because he was not really claimed by Muslims that much within his lifetime, by like non-Nation of Islam Muslims. But yeah.
What do you mean by American? I mean, obviously I know he's American, but also his focus on like third world, global,
absolutely,
kind of
yeah, and that creates a lot of
nationalist
connections
movements.
too. I think the fact that he traveled,
it's a global figure.
Oh, absolutely. But I think he's particularly revered in an almost, I would say, quasi-religious way by young Muslim Americans. People post on social media during his birthday and his death anniversary, including, you know, I've done that too. People visit his gravesite in upstate New York. People like, it's almost, I mean this in a positive way. I don't think it's a negative way, but it's almost a little bit like a sanctification, like, you know, like a yeah. All right, Malcolm and Palestine. So we've arrived. So in addition to being a really brilliant organizer in the US, Malcolm traveled a lot, and he really actively was seeking to create relationships between burgeoning third world liberation movements, anti-colonial movements, and he also traveled to recently liberated countries in Africa and in the Middle East that had just been freed from colonialism. He spent a lot of time in Ghana, for example, which had just become independent from the British. And he really saw this as the same struggle as the struggle of oppressed peoples in the US. And yeah, I mean, he wasn't a politician, but if he had been, like, it would have been an impressive roster of countries visited and leaders met, even for a politician. So he met with like Gamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt, who's the president of Egypt, who like really promoted pan-socialism and pan-Arabism. I don't know enough about Gamal Abdel Nasser. It sounds like he was a disappointment in some ways, but his rhetoric got a lot of people really fired up. And there was this kind of like important idea of like Malcolm promoting Pan-Africanism, and then Gamal Abdel Nasser with the Pan-Arabism and that kind of fusion. And then Gamal Abdel Nasser was like super rough on the Muslim Brotherhood, which I know is a very complicated organization. And Malcolm also met with the Muslim Brotherhood, not in Egypt, that would have been an extraordinary feat, but in Lebanon. So he met with factions that like were at odds with each other. He was that skilled. Like, he was really a brilliant, again, I don't know what word to use besides politician, even though he didn't technically have a state. And then in addition to all those places, he went to Palestine. So he went to so the Nakba, or the catastrophe that led to Israel being created, was in 1948. And Malcolm went to Jerusalem in 1959, and then to Gaza in 1964. And he was in Gaza for 2 days. He went to at that time the Gaza Strip was under the control of Egypt. Was Gaza under control of Egypt till what, 1969?
Sounds right, but I'm not sure of the exact dates.
Okay, I'm guessing until that war. And he visited the Khan Yunis refugee camp, which I feel like it's kind of emotional knowing that we've heard like Khan Yunis in the news recently. And he met with local political and religious leaders. And we've got an op-ed that he essentially published here talking about Zionism that we're gonna just read together. I haven't read it yet. Have you?
No.
So we can kind of read it together. And he published this, I think, in Egypt. Yeah, the Egyptian Gazette in 1964.
Crazy that he visited the refugee camp when all of this started just in October 7th.
I know. Yeah.
How's that possible?
I don't know. He was a time traveler.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it's called Zionist Logic by Malcolm X. The Zionist armies that now occupy Palestine claim their ancient Jewish prophets predicted that in, quote, the last days of this world, end quote, their own God would raise them up a Messiah who would lead them to their promised land. Keeps on going and says, if the Israeli Zionists believe that their present occupation of Arab Palestine is the fulfillment of predictions made by their Jewish prophets, it only, I'm going to skip around a little bit, only means a different form of iron-like rule, more firmly entrenched even than that of the former European colonial powers. I think this is such a good point, because I think for some reason people seem to trip a little bit on this idea of like, well, you know, it's predicted in the Bible. One, that is not an interpretation that is shared by all Jews. That's not even an interpretation that early Zionists all agreed on. Some people were just like, we need a place to go. It could be in South America. It could be there. Lastly, just because that's your interpretation of someone's religious text or your own religious text doesn't mean that everyone has to abide by it. And I think there's something particularly nefarious about using, I mean, for any kind of religious extremism, using religious language to justify colonization and annexation. So you might be more familiar with, for example, the American policy of manifest destiny, the idea that the U.S. was just meant to expand, like it was God's destiny. And that was used as, you know, like a righteous way to literally slaughter people and evict them from their land.
Or so how black people have the curse of Ham.
Right.
So therefore they are, you know,
it's okay.
Must be slaves.
Yeah. You know, I'm not saying all these things are on the same level, but the way that like ISIS will say that it's their right to create a Islamic State, and then they kill lots of Muslims and they enslave people. Like, yeah, basically the really basic point here is religious extremism is never okay. Yeah, and particularly nefarious, I think, when combined with projects of statecraft.
Yep.
And then under camouflage, she says, the Israeli Zionists are convinced they've successfully camouflaged their new kind of colonialism. Their colonialism appears to be more benevolent, more philanthropic, a system with which they rule simply by getting their potential victims to accept their friendly offers of economic aid and other tempting gifts that they dangle in front of their newly independent African nations whose economies are experiencing great difficulties. This is interesting. I hadn't really thought much about this context, but I guess I actually didn't know this, but I guess it sounds like maybe Israel was trying to like get in with like recently liberated countries by offering aid. At the close of the 19th century, when European imperialists wisely foresaw that the awakening masses of Africa would not submit to their old method of ruling through force and fears, these ever-scheming imperialists had to create a new weapon and find a new base for that weapon. So basically, they're just trying to kind of like buy their way here. Any thoughts? Or and then under dollarism, he says, Zionist Israel's occupation of Arab Palestine has forced the Arab world to waste billions of precious dollars on armaments, making it impossible for these newly independent Arab nations to concentrate on strengthening their economies. And just kind of goes on and on. But yeah, I think like a fair piece, a piece that really weirdly feels like it could have been published yesterday. And a little bit aside from the newly independent nations part.
Yeah. So should we link to that in the
definitely
show notes? So we'll link to that piece. Very prescient, timely, relevant. I think. A really inspirational figure overall. I think a lot of people are kind of right to kind of see him as kind of sanctified, and because he, for that time period, just got around so much. In a way that I can't think of too many other people who, like Castro and a lot of like
I think he was really intentional. Yeah. And I think it's like exactly like you're saying, it's a good blueprint for us today. I think it's actually like heartening to know that like the idea of like solidarity is a very old idea that has different branding in different decades. And, Malcolm was one of the lucky ones who got to attend the non-aligned conference in Bandung in 1955 in Indonesia. And that was a real moment where a lot of people around the world were like, we are the global majority. Like we could do something here. And we could, and even though like it probably didn't materialize as much as they would have happened, I think that like the legacy of that moment is still with us.
I wonder if he met, let's see.
If he met who? And I think when we're talking about things like solidarity, I think thinking about building active connections, right? Building networks, like meeting people, whether it's through travel or in the United States or internationally, and thinking about kind of very real material ways in which different forms of oppression are linked, all super helpful. Oh, damn. He ends this. I hadn't read the last line. In short, the Zionist argument to justify Israel's present occupation of Arab Palestine has no intelligent or legal basis in history, not even in their own religion. Where is their Messiah? Pointing out that even that was kind of like a new interpretation.
Yeah.
And that's the argument I know that some like Hasidic Jewish groups have made, and others.
Yeah. Okay. Well, never mind. I didn't know if he had met Ghassan Khanafani.
He did meet some poet in Gaza whose name I am blanking on, but I didn't hear that name mentioned.
Yeah.
In the show notes also, I'll link a couple of sources for people who are interested in learning more about Malcolm.
Yeah, I think that would be good. It's always nice to reflect. I think last year Ramadan also fell on the date of when that member of the NOA was held by PD.
Maybe did I forget?
NYPD, and I think it's a good time to just like reflect on like really inspirational Muslim leaders.
Absolutely, yeah, learning from our history.
But pick good ones. Yeah, like, I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
It's nice to like go back and look at interesting jurists, people who were really forward thinking with jurisprudence and history and, you know, like like politics and stuff like that. But that's what I like to do since I don't fast.
Well, you're medically exempt, we should say. But
Yeah.
Yeah, you're really good at finding other ways to observe. Oh, we should definitely make another, even just for ourselves, another like Ramadan goals episode.
Yeah.
Because it's coming. It's coming soon.
Well, we do Eid resolutions.
Yeah. And we do Ramadan goals for the month.
Oh, man. Did we make some last year?
We did. I don't think we're doing that well.
Oh, fuck. Hold on. I think...
It's a quick accountability check-in.
Yeah, let's check those.
I don't think we're doing... One is not safe for air, but
I actually don't think we made them in 2023.
I think we did.
Last I have is Eid 2022.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we said creative weekend writing retreat, which we did not do.
But we are doing the writing, the sacred letters is kind of like that.
Visit a national park, which we did not do.
I could do better on
Memorize, refresh a few surahs. Host community-ish event a few months. We did that. Consistently work out together once a week.
We've been doing that.
Hey,
we've been doing that. What are you talking about?
Consistently?
We like work out together at least once a week. We're not together, but we're in the same gym. I think that counts.
Okay. Each of us picks one skill workshop class.
We did the sewing one.
Did we do that? Yeah.
Did we do another one?
Well, this is 2022, but I mean, so yeah, over the course of 2 years, we're accomplishing this. All right. Both submit and apply to something once a month. Jesus Christ, that was ambitious. We did not do that.
That made me submit stuff a few times, but yeah. Okay, well, we should do 2024 ones. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
What is this random pin that's written here? Don't say that out loud. What if it's something important?
Oh, shit. I'll bleep that out.
I don't remember what it was for, but this is like our
think
shared notes apps. They're kind of chaotic.
It might be from when I was trying to get our money back from the bank.
Which we did.
Which we successfully did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you for that roundup. It was
oh my God.
great.
I had one really scandalous thing I just thought to talk about with Malcolm. It's not really scandalous.
About whether or not he was
is it too far
bisexual
from the thing to talk about?
You can bring it up.
I'll mention it really briefly. So this is just kind of
remember, you are an academic and not a gossip. Okay. So.
I'm also bisexual, so I'm invested. Okay. Yeah. So this is like, okay, basically, there's a part in the autobiography, quote unquote autobiography, really biography, where Malcolm describes a man that he knew having sex with other men for money. Mm-hmm. And Manning Marable, who's an amazing historian, I've got his book. Oh no, it's in my office, but huge ass book on Malcolm. Probably one of the foremost historians of Malcolm. He unfortunately passed recently. His kind of theory is... Could
you just hold the microphone still in front of your face?
His theory is that that Malcolm actually, that was something that he did himself, that he was kind of describing it in second person.
Based on what?
I forget, but he had some evidence, like people who had also thought that was the case during the time that he was in Boston. So having said that, he obviously needed money. I don't think that's necessarily proof of being bisexual. Like, you know, he was having sex.
He was so broke, he was bisexual.
Well, I mean, I think he was having sex to be paid. Like, he obviously really needed, you know, he was doing sex work. So I feel like the whole thing is kind of blurry and complicated.
Yeah, I think that's... I would say without any like direct evidence. I mean, it's fine. I guess you can speculate as a historian, but
I should actually find the actual part where he wrote about it, because it was a little bit more than speculation.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's not something I think he like proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, but I think the thing is, like, it shouldn't really matter that much, but I think that he often is thought about as this kind of like paragon of masculinity in a really specific way, that this would like complicate that. And I think the thing that's been complicated and hard is that his family is really annoyed with the historian for writing this, and like have like been really annoyed about the book in general, in spite of a lot of other amazing scholarship that it contains. I mean, it's the most comprehensive book written about Malcolm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just interesting. I mean, it just makes me think more about like what expectations we put on like men and like men of color and Muslim men and like masculinity in general. There was also like a kind of shitty part of Malcolm's life where he was confiding in Elijah Muhammad and saying like, basically like, I can't keep up with my wife, like I'm exhausted, because he slept like 3 hours a day for like the last 4 years of his life, which should not be sustainable for any person.
Because he was worried about getting killed. By the way, put the microphone up to your mouth.
He was worried about getting killed, and also I'm gonna stop.
No, you stop. I have to do work after this.
He was worried about getting.
You don't hold the microphone properly.
He was worried about getting killed, and also he just worked like 24/7. He was an incredibly hard worker. He was really committed to the cause, and I just think it's interesting because I feel like we had this kind of. But then anyway, Elijah Muhammad was an absolute asshole and like spread that around to people, and like also like elaborated on it in ways that were not true, or like to be like, oh, like he can't have sex with his wife kind of thing, where like I think Malcolm was just saying more like, I'm exhausted and I can't be present in my marriage and that kind of thing. And obviously it was like confiding in someone that he thought was trustworthy who wasn't trustworthy. But it just, I don't know, I guess this is a bit of a tangent, but it really does make me think about like how much like Malcolm had to be like this man that, you know, a famous quote from him that gets sampled a lot in hip hop is like, I don't fear death. But he was just a person also, you know, who like was tired because he was a human and like probably did fear death, and certainly feared, like he has said like was afraid of anything happening to his wife or to his children, you know. I mean, there's real consequences to having to stand up to oppression and violence. Like you're not a superhero. You don't just like emerge from that unscathed. So it's interesting to think about him as like a person with a body who was tired and who struggled in his marriage because he was tired. In addition to thinking about him as a person who may have had different like sexual experiences outside of what we think of as like, you know, the normative types of sexual experiences. Yeah.
Especially at that time.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing also, is like this kind of stuff always happened. It just wasn't open.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.